Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown for Wednesday, December 13th. I am Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden. I'm not going to take up too much time here because I know you want to get something off your chest. You woke up, I think it was 5 o'clock in the morning. You went to the weight room and you were like, you tried and you couldn't get off your chest until now. Like you have to relieve it here.
I I do want to take like 30 seconds just to rant about two things quickly. As my whiteboard suggests, one of them is how we look at value in NBA DFS nowadays. I think we have to stop with the 5x 6x value just because like a 3K player that gets you 6x isn't doing you really any good, and you don't necessarily need a 12K player to get 6x to pay off your value. Like we're gonna talk about a few players tonight whose prices have started to climb, but like in the case of like Steven Adams, like I know his price is up there. I know like if he gets you 30 fantasy points, he's probably not going to. That's not like 6x value, but the dude has eclipsed 30 fantasy points in 60% of his games. And at 6,400 tonight, like I'm 100% happy playing that in a matchup like this. So most the thinking in most other daily fantasy sports has evolved, but apparently in basketball we're still living in the 90s and we just can't evolve our way of thinking. So stop thinking that you have to have 5 6x value and start looking at it more like an expected range of outcomes or a floor that a player has. And then also basketball has changed over the years. Players don't match up against the same position 100% of the time. Like because of the pace of the game and because of how offenses have evolved, switching and fast breaks happen a lot in basketball. So just because Victor Oladipo or Avery Bradley or Jimmy Butler or these guys are excellent defenders, that does not mean that they're going to match up with the specific position that they play at 100% of the time. So look at game tape, spend like 5 6 minutes watching how teams play basketball. Like if you want to watch like the first 6 minutes of every half or every quarter, you'll see how players match up defensively. It's not always the way you think. So just evolve the way you think and apply some of the things that we've taken from other sports into NBA DFS. Rant over.
And that's all the time we have today. So we're not going to break down the slates. You got that news. Good luck on tonight.
Good luck.
No, very good points, obviously, because I mean the game has changed and we have to change on a yearly basis with this stuff. And I'll answer, ask you the question for people that want to know is instead of kind of looking at the one-on-one matchups, how do you kind of handle that? Are you looking kind of more of as a team whole against that position?
I look at it in a couple ways. Like I look at how like teams tend to play defense. Like when it comes to like the Hawks, like they're a team where their coach is traditionally against switching on defense. So like they're a team that will tend to match up position by position. But like if you look at the Pacers, and we're gonna talk about that game here soon, but like in the majority of their games that like we talked about, Victor Oladipo hasn't played individual defense on the shooting guard. Like he has spent a lot of time covering small forwards, and like if you look at the game against Cleveland, he actually like he defended J.R. Smith. But like as I was telling you before we started recording, like when J.R. Smith was posted up in the corner, Victor Oladipo had like 1 foot in the paint and was like just playing way off of J.R. Smith. Like he wasn't actually defending anyone. He was just in a help position. And sometimes teams do that. So like you have to look at their opponent. And if you have guys who aren't necessarily great shooters or great at a specific thing, sometimes teams just choose not to cover them and you'll see a lot of help defense. So you have to kind of like look at it on a team by team basis.
Yeah. No, very good points here. And I'm gonna create a Twitter account for your whiteboard. Like it's just gonna be Brent's whiteboard.
It's probably going to go back to the weekly game schedule that it was a few days ago.
Oh man, come on.
And unless there's just things that really like piss me off, and then I'll write about them on the whiteboard.
Let's dive into the slate now. Clippers and Magic, the first game I want to talk about. A lot of injuries in this game, some new, some old. Most of the injuries on the slate, I feel like we can get out of the way pretty early.
God, I hope so. I really do. Like, I think this game, it's interesting. Aaron Aflalo is questionable, but not. I think they're kind of expecting him to not play. We obviously have Terrence Ross and Jonathan Isaac out for Orlando. Aaron Gordon is questionable with a concussion, but I believe they're leaning towards him actually playing. But we should know that here pretty early on in the afternoon.
Yeah, we'll start with this Clippers side. Obviously, a lot of people burned by Gallinari the other night. We've seen the injuries kind of come and go for the Clippers this season. As far as guys, it's weird because I don't have a lot of interest in the Clippers tonight, which is weird because of how bad Orlando has been on the defensive side. I mean, you can take some shots here. Like Austin Rivers is still at a fair price if you're looking to go that way. I know even with Teodosic badge, like it's still a little bit of a muddled situation. Lou Williams and GPPs, like I'll never say no given his usage. So I still think there's better options though.
I have a lot of interest in this Clippers team, and it kind of starts with the point guard position. Like I know Teodosic is only going to be playing limited minutes, but like he played 21 against Toronto. He attempted 12 shots in 21 minutes. Like that's if he's going to be out here chucking and against a bad defense like the Magic at 3,900, if he's going to get 22, 24 minutes, it's pretty darn easy for him to pay off that salary. Like you realistically expect him to get 22, 24, 25 fantasy points, and like he's going to shoot a bunch. He's a great passer. Like he didn't actually have any assists in that game against Toronto, which is kind of shocking, but like the dude is the best passer in the NBA. Like I don't care what anyone says, like just watch him play. Like he's the best passer in the NBA. Like I think he's in play in all formats, even though he's going to be playing limited minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it. And, I think when we look at the front court here, like I still have a ton of interest in DeAndre Jordan on this slate. You okay?
Aaron Gordon ruled out.
Oh, I was like, what's going on? If you didn't catch it because the screen was on me, he was throwing his arms around, and I didn't know what was going on.
That was me throwing my arms up and freaking in disgust because it like 20 minutes ago he was questionable and working his way through concussion protocol and was looking good, and now he's ruled out.
Well, at least we got the news at 11:42 Eastern time.
Yeah, there's that. So that actually kind of changes things. Like I have some more interest in the Clippers here. Like we saw last game, they actually played small for 6 or 7 minutes, and you had Rivers and Williams and Teodosic playing alongside each other. Like I think all three are great options here. And Sam Decker is in play for a very cheap option. We saw him play decent minutes. Without Gordon, it's a decent spot for him. I kind of like my boy Sam Decker here.
Yeah, I mean we saw the Wesley Johnson kind of fall off the wagon, who was filling in prior. They played 19 minutes last game. Never a guy really that was a high usage play anyway. And like you said, with Lou Williams, who can play the three here, especially against this Orlando team. I think Lou Williams will obviously get overlooked because of his price tonight, and I think a lot of people are going to go other directions. So I'm kind of looking at him as the lower owned high upside play here that really I don't think a lot of people will be on.
I don't think so either, and I think people are going to be scared off of Williams and Rivers because they're going to just assume that with Milos back that they're going to start to lose minutes. And yeah, I mean they're going to lose like 2 or 3 minutes, but like as many shots as these guys attempt, like the offense goes through them, like for the most part. So they're all great options, and I would expect Doc to be a little proactive and start running like small lineups here. And it's a great spot for them to do it against a team in Orlando who, because of injuries, is going to be playing like a pretty guard heavy lineup. Like you're going to see Mario Hezonja play the 4 at times. Like, and he's not a big dude. So like it's going to be a lot of small ball here. So all three of those guys are in play, and I'm not fading DeAndre Jordan here. Like there's just no way. We've seen the shot attempts go up in the month of December without Blake Griffin. The assist numbers are starting to go up. Blocks and steals are there. He has 17 rebounds in back-to-back games, 21 in the game before that. It's a Barbara Walters game for DeAndre Jordan tonight. It's 20 and 20.
He's only 7,300 on DK. Like I feel like that's one of the better values for a guy who's, in that 7K range tonight.
Yeah, it really is. And I wrote about it in my GPP article. And over the last 3 seasons, I think they've played 4 times and he's had one game under 40 fantasy points. And I believe I didn't actually go back and look, but I would imagine at least one or two of those games had Blake Griffin. So yeah, DeAndre
Yeah,
Jordan, 2020, lock it in.
I'm in there. I'm in for it. Anyone else on the Clippers side you're interested in?
Nope.
So now we got that news for the Orlando. Before we hit Orlando, we didn't have to backtrack or anything. With Orlando just being as decimated in terms of injuries, Vucevic, that we were talking before the show. I mean, obviously he's been phenomenal over the last few games, coming off a monster triple double. The price is sky high. Like this is another good spot against centers here for Vucevic. I like him. The price is high, but he's going to be a guy that I feel like I need to get some exposure to here.
I agree. The price is elevated, and that is a little concerning. But like we saw him just come off of a triple double against the Hawks, like without anybody in this lineup that can really help distribute the ball outside of Simmons and a little bit of Alfred. Like he's going to be relied upon as a ball handler a little bit more. Without Gordon in the lineup, without Aflalo in the lineup, and without Ross and Isaac, Vucevic has a 34% usage rate, 1.79 fantasy points per minute. 1.79. Like that's a small sample. It's less than 30 minutes, but that's insane. And like as I talked about at the start, I understand he's probably not going to 6x his salary. That being said, he has a really high floor and an extremely high ceiling in a matchup against a Clippers team that ranks 22nd in the NBA over the last 5 games in defensive efficiency against the center. They're giving up 22 points, 15 rebounds, 3.4 assists, and a combined 3.6 blocks and steals to centers over the last 5 games.
Sign me up, sir. Sign me up. And you mentioned Jonathan Simmons. He's a guy that I do have a lot of interest in tonight. He's another one price to come up a little bit. But, in a starter's role here with Orlando, playing 30 plus minutes and playing heavier minutes, and will be relied on quite a bit with all the injuries here. He's another one I'm going to be looking at quite a bit here because he's in this mid range, and I do think he has quite a bit of upside, especially given the fact that we just saw it against Atlanta. Like this is another spot where he can dominate.
Yeah, I think it's a guy that you kind of have to look at in cash. Like I know again that price is pretty high, but I mean the minutes have to be there for him. They're running out of options here, but like a 30 almost 31% usage rate with all these injured players off the floor, like it's a spot where it's really tough to not consider him just because like there's gonna be so much usage there for him and the minutes are secure. So cash games for sure. GPPs, I do like him a little bit. Um, there's probably a few other guys I'm going to look at in his price range that you could consider as decent pivots. But yeah, like I can't say no to Simmons here.
You have any interest in Peyton tonight?
A little bit. It does concern me. Like they kind of got away from him in that Atlanta game a little bit. Some of that could be because it was a back to back, and maybe they just wanted to rest him a little. GPPs only.
Yeah, I think he's a GPP play. He is the one guy that I do have the issue with the price tag on Orlando's side. He's 7,700 on FanDuel, 72 on DK. Eric Bledsoe's cheaper by quite a bit on on FanDuel by 800. You have Kemba Walker, who's in a pretty decent spot for me tonight, even though obviously Chris Paul is there, but he's only a couple hundred around that range. So I think those are the two guys that I'm eyeing a little bit more than Peyton.
Yeah, kind of the same here. You could go with maybe like Augustine or Shelvin Mack in GPPs if you wanted to, and if you want it, like I don't know what Vogel's going to do. I don't know necessarily why he went away from Elfrid Payton, but if he's going to do it again and they're going to play a really guard heavy lineup or a lineup with a lot of ball handling, either one of those guys could see increased minutes.
Yeah. Did you have any interest in any front court guys outside of Vooz?
No, because I don't
Do you
really
want?
know what he's gonna do. Like I'm not gonna go with Mario. Like Mario is not good.
Yeah. Moving on here, Memphis and Washington, 199 total. John Wall due back for tonight's game. I don't have a ton of interest in this game here. I know, Wall's a guy that you're taking a look at here on this slate one because he's cheap. He dropped below 8K last night on DraftKings. He's 7,900.
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily like I'm looking at him and more so like if I'm building 20 lineups or 150 lineups, I would have a little bit of exposure. Not a great matchup, probably a slower paced game. Like you could take a shot at GPPs. Like you're definitely not going there in cash because you expect him to come back and his minutes to be pretty limited. So he's really the only guy that I even have any interest in. Just because like all these Washington players with Wall back are just way too expensive.
Yeah, I don't really like anyone on Washington here. I don't really like anyone on Memphis. Marcus Gasol is always kind of the one that stands out to me here, but too many other center options that I'm really looking at. And the same kind of goes with Tyreek. I just kind of like a lot of other guys in that range. Worth flyers and GPPs if you want to use Evans. That's pretty much it, though.
I do like Tyreek Evans quite a bit here. Like he's probably the only guy from Memphis I'm really considering just because, the minutes are there for him, usage is there for him. He gets a matchup against a Washington team that's not great at defending the rim. Um, I do have quite a bit of interest in him, and I think he probably goes overlooked because most people are just going to ignore this game.
Yep. Anyone else you want to talk about?
If you want Gasol, that's fine. Gortat sees a little bit of a boost with Wall back, but there's better options.
Yeah. OKC, Indiana next year, 212. A lot to kind of break down here. We'll start with this OKC side. Obviously, in a great spot against a bad Indiana defense. And it's weird to say because I think obviously with all four guys kind of in play tonight for me, like it's hard to kind of divvy up. But you and I were talking about Paul George before the show here. He's going to be really popular. Like I kind of want to fade, and I think he is going to be given the fact that they have this whole narrative going on. Obviously, going back to Indy.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be something he's gonna be popular because of the whole revenge game narrative, and if you want to play him for that, go for it. He's GPPs only for me. Like I'm not gonna go there in cash. Like I like him. It's an okay spot for him. Like they don't really have anyone that can kind of match up with this size. Like you'll see Bogdanovich and Oladipo try to defend him, but like it's not a great. Neither one of those guys are going to be really able to stop him. So again, GPPs, it's fine. I'll never say no to Westbrook. Like you could use him as a pivot off of Paul George here. The status of Robertson is going to be interesting to see. I kind of like Abrinas just a little bit if Robertson sits, and I have to play my man Steven Adams. Like I mentioned him in my rant earlier, but like I know that price is up there, but against a Pacers team that's just absolutely terrible, I can't fade Steven Adams here. Like I wrote about it in the GPP article. He leads the NBA and paint touches per game at 12, averaging almost 11 points per game in the paint, going against a team that's giving up almost 50 points in the paint and a bunch of rebounds. Like Adams is going to go off here, like 35, 40 point like outing from him, and I will take that all day long at freaking like 6,400.
Yeah, he's the guy on FanDuel. If I'm not paying up at a center spot, I'm using Adams. On DK, I'm using Adams because I'm using two centers tonight because I like so many. Just such a prime spot for him at people will say heightened price. I think it's a fair price still for what he's putting up. So I'm on board. I have a little interest in Melo, even with his recent performances at his price. It's just always hard to say no to power forwards against Indiana. Melo, obviously, we look at last game, I think it's a little bit tough to kind of construe because Paul George, only played 17 minutes. We saw Westbrook and we saw Melo kind of pick up a lot of the slack in that game.
Yeah, the one concern I have with Melo, which I guess can be kind of alleviated by the fact that his price is really cheap, is that I do think they're going to try to let Paul George get his. Like, so you're probably going to see Melo pass up some of his shots. And part of the reason why I think that is because Melo has his own revenge game coming up on the weekend whenever he visits Madison Square Garden. So I kind of feel like this is a you get yours tonight, I'll get mine over on the weekend type situation for Melo. So again, it's fine in GPPs. Paul George great GPP play. And again, Westbrook is fine. It's Adams and cash games for me. I think has just such a safe floor because of the minutes and the production that he's had recently, and he has a pretty darn high ceiling, and especially in this matchup. I mean, we saw him put up 41 fantasy points against him last time out. You could see that again easily.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. Move on to the Indiana side here. Obviously, Victor Oladipo at crazy high prices, but I mean, deservingly so. Like his production this season has been phenomenal. What to do with this Indiana side? Like, I feel like I want to get a little bit of a piece here, but obviously going up against OKC, it's not a great spot for a lot of these guys. I'm going to have a share of Oladipo, I think, in GPPs, but I'm going to be looking elsewhere in cash games.
This is like the one part of the revenge game narrative that I will probably buy into. Obviously, one, Robertson is questionable, and that changes the face of this defense a lot. Like without him on the floor this season, their defensive efficiency plummets to 106.8. Like they've posted a 103.1 defensive rating with Alex Abrines over the last three on the floor of the last 3 games. Their defense on the road is not as good. Their transition defense has really struggled at times. Oladipo, like all the usage is going to be there for him. The shots are going to be there for him. The help defense statistics, like the blocks and the steals, are going to be there for him. And if we see Collison sit, like I can't fade Oladipo here if Collison sits. Like we saw what he did against Denver. You would expect, I mean, not a performance like that again, but like he's going to be a high usage guy, especially if Collison sits. So I think he's fine in all formats, and he's a guy that has really shown that like he is very, very vengeful this season. Like he wants to crap on every team that traded him. So he's a guy that I will have in cash games and GPPs.
Do you have any interest in anyone else here? Like tough front court spot for these guys. Thaddeus Young is, a guy that I don't mind on DK. He's only 5,900. In a spot here against Melo, like I don't mind him in cash games just because I do think a 25-30 fantasy point floor is there here in the spot.
Yeah, you could go there. Like I think the status of Collison's going to change kind of how we're going to look at this game. Like I don't mind Corey Joseph, who I mean he played 31 minutes on Sunday, shot 1 of 7 from the floor. You would expect him to shoot a little bit better. So you could look his way at like 4,200 on DraftKings, and maybe some Lance Stevenson who would place extra minutes and do some more ball handling with that second unit if Collison sits.
Yep. And anyone else there?
Nope.
Denver, Boston here, 206 total. We got some injury news, with Horford being rested tonight. That changes a little bit of things here. We obviously seen Jason Tatum usage rate right around 25% with Horford and Marcus Morris off. He's a guy that I'll take a look at tonight. But outside, it's weird. I don't have a lot of interest in Boston because I feel like we're going to get to a core of games here very soon that I have more interest in.
Wait, we have injury news?
We do have injury news, yes.
Really?
Yeah, but we got this on 2 days. We had 2 days to prepare for it.
Yeah, you mentioned Horford being out. You would expect, I guess this is one of those situations where we kind of have to wait and see because with Jokic being questionable for this game, it's going to change what lineup Stevens rolls out. If Jokic sits, like Baines will get the start, and I think he's fine in cash games, but I wouldn't expect him to play a bunch of minutes. Like Boston could kind of go small and use like Daniel Tice and a couple, like maybe even Tatum at the 5 a little bit. So kind of monitor the news. If Jokic plays, you kind of have to imagine Baines plays a decent amount of minutes, and it's a tough matchup, but it would be hard for him to not get like 20 fantasy points. So I'll take that at his price. I do have a little interest in Tatum. It's a good spot. We see the usage go up for him with Horford off the floor. Kyrie is kind of the guy that I'm really looking at. 35% usage rate with Horford off and with Morris off. 1.14 fantasy points per minute. Going to take a lot of shots tonight, so he's kind of the way that I'm looking to get exposure here from the Boston side of things.
Yeah, I'm not really going to the secondary options here. Like Kyrie in the spot, Denver obviously struggles against point guards. With that usage rate, like you mentioned, he'll be a guy that I take a look at. And his price tag, I mean, it's not too bad, I guess, in kind of comparison to some of these other guys, like in that low 8K range. Like he's still cheaper than Paul, who's kind of creeping up now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think if you're looking in cash games, obviously, I think you'd rather have Kyrie. Um, he's fine in GPPs too. Like I don't necessarily mind him. Sorry, like I'm getting injury news on my screen as I'm trying to talk. So uh, we'll get to that game here in a second. But yeah, I don't mind him in all formats, and I think he probably goes overlooked because like you mentioned Chris Paul, like that's a national TV game at home. Like I think he probably draws more ownership than I got Kyrie here.
Yeah, I think so. And on the Denver side, with this injury news, was that related here to Denver side?
No, it was Anthony Davis.
I haven't seen yet, so we'll get to that here. It's just surprise me. It'll be like a Christmas gift. On the Denver side, I mean, we saw Will Barton leave last night. He's probable for tonight. Jokic questionable. This is a spot I don't have a lot of interest in Denver outside of really just GPPs, and it kind of all just basically depends on what shakes out injury wise.
Yeah, I think Jokic being back could just kind of have me off of the majority of this game. I don't necessarily mind Will Barton if he plays and he's good to go. Um, we pretty much saw last night, like it was him and Jamal Murray doing almost all the work. So both those guys are interesting options if Jokic sits. Trey Lyles is definitely interesting. Again, he got a decent amount of minutes, was really good in that Detroit game. He's still really cheap. Um, and I don't know what FanDuel is doing, but Wilson Chandler at 4,100 is way too cheap. Like having Wesley Iwundu being higher priced than Wilson Chandler is insane. And the fact that I just mentioned Wesley Iwundu, and I guarantee like 98% of our listeners or watchers don't even know who that is, that tells you how bad that pricing mistake is. So you're only expecting like 25 to 30 minutes with Chandler, but he's been a little more aggressive, and it's a solid spot for him. So he's the guy I would look at in cash games on FanDuel.
Yeah, I think Lyles and Chandler are both intriguing options, given their price tags are really cheap. And, I know you've been talking about how much, Malone's been looking at Lyles over the last few weeks, and we've seen that production kind of come and the minutes be pretty stable. But I say that now.
Yeah, minutes are not stable with anyone for Mike Malone. As we saw last night, Kenneth Faried did not play, and Darrell Arthur got minutes. I actually kind of think Faried is like a sneaky GPP option tonight because I think he probably gets the majority of minutes. If Jokic sits, I think you see Faried play a decent amount of minutes, and I absolutely love him in this spot against Boston if Jokic sits.
Yep. Portland, Miami next here, 201 total. This is a game I just don't have a ton of interest in, really on both sides. And I know you mentioned Lillard to me before the show, someone the guy you have a little bit of interest in.
Yeah, it mostly comes from we're going to have to wait and see on Yusuf Nurkic. If Nurkic sits and Harkless sits, I will go back to Damian Lillard. Just because, like, without Nurkic and without Harkless, he has 43% usage rate. That's just insane. Without Harkless, he still has a 35% usage rate, which is really, really high. I think Nurkic plays like all reports from the beat writers yesterday where he went through, was going through drills prior to the game and actually looked really good. So I would expect him to play. Lillard's an excellent GPP option. He's kind of destroyed Miami in the past. Like last season, he averaged 34 points against Miami in 2 games. So I think you can definitely look at him in GPPs, and if either one of those guys sits, Nurkic or Harkless or both sit, he's an excellent option in all formats.
Yep, no, certainly. Any interest on Miami side?
No.
Easy enough. Move on here to Utah and Chicago, another lower total game. Starting with the Utah side, there was 2 guys I know you and I both have some interest in tonight, Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, kind of the key guys for Utah here. Mitchell's the guy who will get overlooked on tonight's slate. I think this game will just in general, and Gobert's fairly cheap.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I'm looking at Gobert just because he's really cheap and it is a decent matchup. He's been solid against Robin Lopez in the past 2 of the last 3 games. The last 2 games when Lopez was with Chicago, Gobert has over 40 fantasy points. It's still minutes are starting to climb. He's still a little too cheap for a guy that has a decent amount of upside. And I'm pulling up injury reports right now because I know I saw something. Okay, so Raul Neto has been ruled out with a concussion. Rodney Hood is going to play. Like you're still going to see Mitchell, very high usage guy. It's a solid GPP option. No one's really going to go there tonight just because this game is very unappealing. So I don't mind that, like using him as like in a shooting guard position. But Gobert's the guy that I'm mainly looking at just because he's too cheap.
Any interest in Chicago at all?
We've seen the Jazz kind of struggle at times to defend like the 3-point line, so that does have me interested a little bit in Justin Holiday, just because his price is really low. I think he's like 4,900 on DraftKings. Let's see.
Yeah,
4,900. It's probably a little too cheap for a guy that's going to attempt like 12, 11 shots tonight. So you could take a look there. Chris Dunn, cash game viable, but it's just not a great game to target.
Yep. We get into these last three here. This is kind of where, I'm going to be sitting for a lot of my core guys tonight. And we'll start with this game, Milwaukee, New Orleans, 218 total. Feed us the Anthony Davis news. Did we get what we want to hear?
Anthony Davis says he should be able to play tonight, but it will be a game time decision.
I'm going to hit stop broadcast right now.
Could have stopped the broadcast, yell a bunch of obscenities, and then start re-recording again.
Yeah, I don't want to do this, man. I really don't with Davis tonight. It's a game that starts at 8. Will we get that news before 7 o'clock? I'm going to take a shot and probably say no, because why would we? Why would we get something that we want?
And this is why we can't have nice things.
It's true. So here we go. We got to do the dance, but we'll start with the Milwaukee side here. Ton of interest in everyone really here. I love Eric Bledsoe. I know you wrote about Eric Bledsoe today in your GPP article. He's still too cheap for his recent production. He's averaging nearly 35 fantasy points per game over the last 5. Hard time saying no to Eric Bledsoe on tonight's slate. I think he's going to be a pretty core play.
Yeah, it's pretty easy for me to kind of lock him in. Like I'm just not going to say no to Eric Bledsoe tonight. Like we've seen the usage is there for him. It's like right around 28% since joining the Bucks. The production has been solid. I wrote about him in the GPP article, so I'll leave like a little bit of information out so people can either sign up or just actually read it. But the Pelicans defense with Rondo on the floor is really, really bad. Really, really, really bad. 116.1 defensive rating with Rondo on the floor. That's bad. This is just an excellent spot for Bledsoe. I absolutely love him tonight. This game, if Davis sits, this game is extremely stackable, like from both sides. If Davis plays, it's still stackable, but there's less that you can attack with on the Pelicans side, I think. Bledsoe's great. I absolutely love him. Giannis, I'm never going to say no to Giannis. Chris Middleton's a guy that I have a ton of interest in here, playing just a boatload of minutes. No Tony Snell, no Matthew Dellavedova tonight. Like, he's going to get all the minutes he can handle. He has a 25% usage rate with those guys off the floor, almost a fantasy point per minute. The Pelicans have really struggled to guard the perimeter. They struggle to defend spot-up shooters. I think this is a spot where we see Middleton come out and put up like 45, 50 fantasy points tonight.
And ownership-wise, like I want to say Middleton's going to be overlooked, and then I feel like I might be a little bit shocked that he is higher owned when kind of the slate comes about.
I actually okay, so I'm gonna let people in on a little secret. I listen to every other podcast around the industry. It's part of I think if you do any kind of like DFS content providing, I think you're doing yourself and people a disservice to not actually listen to the competition, because there's going to be stuff that you miss from time to time, and there's going to be stuff that other people miss, and like you can gain an edge by doing that. And like he's been talked about in every podcast that I've listened to, so I don't think you're going to get him at low ownership, at least I wouldn't expect it just because of how much talk people have had about him, but I don't really care. Like this game, like if you stack the Pelicans and Rockets the other night, you probably made a bunch of money. Like this game has that same feel. Like if you stack this game, you could end up like winning a buttload of money, and you can do it by fading guys like Cousins and Giannis.
Yeah. When we saw that the other night, and that's pretty much all the interest I had for really the three guys from Milwaukee, just their main studs.
Yeah, you're not looking at John Henson or any of these other guys. Like Malcolm Brogdon might see a few extra minutes. He's cheap enough where you could consider using him. I don't necessarily mind that play.
And on the New Orleans side, obviously, let's start as if we anticipate Anthony Davis on sitting, and then we'll get to his if he plays. Obviously, Cousins sky high usage with Davis. The potential there is huge. He's another one where I'll use your line. You won't say no to Cousins. He is high in price, but there are also a ton of centers cheaper on this slate, like DeAndre Jordan, like Vucevic, like Adams. Um, I have more interest in guys like Drew Holiday and each one more if Davis sits. If Davis plays, I don't have a lot.
Like it is such an amazing spot for DeMarcus Cousins that like I can't tell you to fade him in any format. If Davis sits, I mean, 38% usage rate, 1.57 fantasy points per minute. The Milwaukee Bucks over the last 5 games, 27th in the NBA in defensive efficiency. They're giving up 30 real points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists. Like it's a great spot for him. Like this is one of those situations where like I've been comfortable at times fading Cousins without Davis. Like against Houston, I was comfortable fading him. Um, like the Denver game where he put up 81 fantasy points, like this is the same kind of matchup against Milwaukee. So if Davis sits, I'm generally a guy that likes to build balanced lineups, but I will be trying to get Cousins in all formats just because it's such an amazing spot. But as you mentioned, there are a lot of great options. For building a bunch of lineups, like I would suggest, like if you're building 10 lineups, I would maybe say 4 or 5 of them have Cousins. The other half, or however you want to break it down, probably go like a very balanced route here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try and kind of narrow down my center core as the day goes on. With currently, obviously, DJ and Adams kind of leading the way, and if we get Davis news early, obviously Cousins kind of jumps into the list as more of a primary play. Um, yeah, I mean, as you said, Milwaukee obviously struggles against centers. Like you said, this is just such a prime spot. And then we kind of look at some of the other guys. I mean, if Davis plays, like I'm a little off of Cousins. I'm kind of a little off of kind of everyone else, just a little bit. Like I'll still get some exposure, but I could kind of see maybe that potential where if Davis comes back, it's kind of a 50 fantasy point upside type thing here with both of them.
Like I would still have some exposure to Cousins in cash because it's still just a massive upside spot for him. And especially with like the way the Pelicans are playing right now, they over the last 6 games, Andre Roberson is ruled out, so that there we go. But over the last 6 games, the Pelicans have averaged 120.7 points. Like that's a lot of points. So like there's still upside here. So I would use them in cash. I think you could justify a fade in GPPs if Davis plays. If Davis sits, you're looking at Drew Holiday. Like I think you can still use him even if Davis plays, but Drew Holiday's fine. And Etuan Moore is just an excellent option if Davis sits. We saw him just go bananas last time out. Milwaukee really, really, really struggles against 3-point shooters. Like I'm trying to scroll up through my notes here, but okay, they're allowing opponents to shoot 40% from the floor on above the break threes and 42% on corner threes. So that's 39.7% overall on 3-pointers. Like Etuan Moore could have another bananas game here shooting the ball.
Yeah, no, I'm about that. And Rajon Rondo, prices come play 6,300 on DK, 58 on FanDuel. I think he's a little bit better value over on FanDuel. I don't mind him tonight. I know you weren't as high on him.
It's kind of a tough matchup. Like if you look at it, like the way like the Bucks have kind of abandoned it recently, like their trap defense. But they're not allowing this season. They're not allowing a bunch of assists to point guards, and that's kind of where Rondo gets the majority of his value. Like over the last 5 games, they're only allowing 5.8 assists per game to the point guard position. Over the last 10, 7.2. And overall in the season, it is 7.3. Like Rondo needs those double digit, like 12, 14, 15 assists to really get value because he's not a guy that does a ton of scoring. So it's gonna be kind of tough. Like he could still do it. Like I think you can take a shot on him in GPPs, but at 6,300 on DraftKings, there's a decent amount of point guards and just guards in general that I like a little bit more.
Yeah, the price on DK is where I kind of had the issue. The 50 on FanDuel because the range gets a little bit lighter below. Like I'm okay with him there.
Yeah.
So, anyone else you want to talk about from this one?
I guess Darius Miller's interesting if Davis sits, and no, that's it.
Toronto and Phoenix 217 total here. Toronto 11-point favorites. Let's start with this Toronto side here. I have some interest in Lowry. I do think this one can get a little bit out of hand tonight. That's usually I know blowouts is something we're not really on and talking about, but I do think this one can get a little bit out of hand.
You know what's interesting is, and I talked about this the last time these teams played. Phoenix actually plays Toronto really, really well. The last game was 126-113, but the Suns have won 10 of their past 13 home games versus the Raptors. Like that's a pretty solid. That's like a pretty solid record. Like I know there's no Devin Booker, and that makes things really tough. But like I don't know why the Suns like to play Jay Triano or the Raptors pretty tough. So maybe it's the Jay Triano roots because I think he coached for the Raptors at one point. I had to look that up, but I think he did. But I'm not necessarily as worried about a blowout here. Obviously, I hate trying to predict those, but this is a good game. There's a decent amount of fantasy value on both sides of this contest.
Yeah, there is, and I think Kyle Lowry obviously coming off a down game. A great bounce back spot for him. Obviously, he went up for over 45 fantasy points in that first meeting. Came around obviously a lot over 40 fantasy points, and there's got to be some other injury news because you just tilted your head back.
Nicholas Batum is now probable tonight.
Oh, God. Well, I like Lowry. That's enough you need to know.
Yeah, I do actually really like Kyle Lowry here. Point guards against the Raptors is a thing. Like the last 2 games, he's shot really, really bad, and that's really hurt his value. Like 4 of 17 against the Kings, 4 of 13 against the Clippers. Like he's still getting the peripherals. Like I think this is an excellent spot to go back here with Lowry after he burned everyone. I mean, we saw him put up a huge game against the Suns last time out, 48.5 fantasy points in 35 minutes. So I like Lowry. I love DeRozan here. Not going to be that podcast that's like we're never going to play DeMar DeRozan. I think he's fine cash game play. He has a really safe floor, and he has upside here because like he can get to the line a decent amount against a team that is young and fouls a lot. So I really like DeRozan here. I think Serge Ibaka is like my guy. Like I wrote about him in the GPP article again tonight, and like I wrote about him last time they played, and he went bonkers. He had 37 fantasy points, and it kicked off this stretch of games where like he's been over 30 fantasy points in 4 straight games, and it was kicked off by that Phoenix game where he played 33 minutes, went 8 of 13 from the floor. He's shooting 50% for 3-point range over his last 4 games, 54.5% from the floor. That's a great spot for Ibaka. And at that price, people are going to kind of be off of him, but I love him in cash games and GPPs tonight.
Yep, I'm on board. He's another guy I just find to be kind of too cheap for his recent production. You mentioned it, 30-plus fantasy points in each of the last 4 games. Really good spot. Phoenix, 29th in defensive efficiency against power forwards this year. They're also allowing a fair amount of blocks, which we've seen Ibaka kind of tick up in the last few games as well. So that just kind of adds on to Ibaka.
Air Congo. I'm all in for some Serge Ibaka chase down blocks. I miss seeing that here in Oklahoma City. I love Serge Ibaka so much.
Anyone else on Toronto's side? Like Valanciunas, I'm not really looking at tonight. Um, we got him right last time, but
Yeah, this is a game where it's a fast-paced game, so he's probably going to get played off the floor. Like he generally sees fewer minutes in past fast-paced games. Like I went back and looked at all the games that Toronto's played in, and almost all of them were fast-paced matchups. Some of them were blowouts, so that has to be taken into consideration. But for the most part, like in these fast-paced matchup, he's playing like 15, 18 minutes, and you're seeing Serge play at the five and Jakob Pertl and Pascal Siakam getting extra minutes. So it's Serge. Um, if you don't want to take the risk with Milos Teodosic, Fred VanVleet's a guy you can look at here. I think he's going to be popular. Like he was really popular the other night when these two teams played. 3,800. He's playing limited minutes, but like at 20 fantasy points is not out of the realm of possibility for him tonight against Phoenix.
no, definitely not. Did you have any interest in any of those front court guys outside of Ibaka? You mentioned a few of them.
Uh, if you want like a cheap like option, like Pirtle's fine. Um, I mean, he's probably going to play about 20 to 24 minutes. Like, again, he's a guy that I think can get you 20 fantasy points. So, cash games, go for it.
Yep. On the Sun side of things, we obviously seen last night, we saw kind of split usage once again between some of the guards. We saw Troy Daniels get in there a little bit more. I feel like we kind of repeat ourselves with the Suns backcourt.
Yeah, I think we're gonna be just repeating ourselves with like the Suns in general because their coach Jay Triano, who by the way did coach for the Raptors, he just has this insane train of thought that he has to play like everybody on the team. Like and this is a spot where I'm going back to the well with Mike James. We saw him get a little bit of run last night when Ulyss was out, like when Ulyss was in the locker room. He's just a guy that puts up a ton of fantasy points in a limited amount of minutes, and the usage is there for him with no Devin Booker. I mean, we saw 20 minutes, 25 fantasy points against the Kings. It's not a great matchup, but in 16 minutes against the Raptors last time, he took 7 shots, hit 5 of them, had 10 points in 16 minutes. Like he's got to just shoot a bunch, and they need guys that can create shots because without Booker and with Warren struggling, like there's no one else that can really shoot for this team. So Mike James is fine. I'm kind of hoping Ulyss, who played a bunch of minutes last game, sees a few less. Like the trend has been, like if you look over the last like 5 or 6 games, it's been Ulyss played a bunch of minutes. Next game didn't play very many minutes. Ulyss plays a bunch of minutes. Next game plays very few. Ulyss last night played a bunch of minutes. I mean, I don't know what Jay Triano is doing, but there's a pattern emerging there. So if you want to take a shot, go for it.
Yep. And obviously the front court is kind of always in that same boat where, Chandler played a fair amount last night on the back-to-back. Could potentially see him sit tonight, which would obviously open the door for 6 other centers.
Yeah, I do expect him to sit. Like again, this is another one of these patterns that Jay Triano has had now that he has 3 centers and he wants to play all of them. Like you're seeing like Tyson Chandler start one night and Alex Lynn back him up, and then like the next night you're seeing Greg Monroe start and Alex Lynn back him up. So I think Monroe gets a start again tonight, and I do like him quite a bit at 4,800 on DraftKings. It's a good matchup for him, especially if Valanciunas is going to be played off the floor. I do have a lot of interest in Greg Monroe.
Yeah, I mean, put up 34 fantasy points in that prior meeting, played 26 minutes. I don't have any issue. Monroe's the guy that I do always kind of have the interest in. If I can try and anticipate that the minutes will be there, like I'll take shots on him. We've seen Len be a pretty good fantasy points per minute player over the last few games, but he's just not going to be a guy who plays, 25 plus minutes.
Yeah, unless like everybody is injured, you're not going to see him play a bunch of minutes. So it's Monroe for me. I think we get that news fairly early. Like the beat writers in Phoenix have been doing a decent job of getting us that news at like an early time. Unfortunately, I know we got screwed by it the other night with Tyson Chandler being announced as a starter earlier in the afternoon and then being scratched at like after lock. But that wasn't on the beat writers. That was on Jay Triano. So just I try to tweet out any of the news that is extremely relevant. So just make sure you're following what news is coming out there.
Yep. And TJ Warren, I think he's just a little too expensive. I think the ceiling's a bit capped.
Yeah, he right now it's just so tough for him to be productive because defenses are able to key on him. Like shot attempts are still there for him, so he could obviously have a good game, but like rebounds are kind of down because he's focusing more on trying to be the offensive, like shouldering the offensive load, so he's not crashing the glass as much. So that kind of caps his upside.
Yep. Charlotte Houston last game of the night, 221 total. Obviously, the Batum news kind of throws a little bit of a wrench into things here with this Charlotte side. Like I had some interest in Kemba, I had some interest in Jeremy Lamb, and if Batum's back and kind of giving a full go, I don't have a lot of interest.
Yeah, I'm just waiting because like I know exactly what's going to happen. Like Batum is now probable, and like he's going to play and play like 12 minutes, and like he's going to look terrible, and then Jeremy Lamb's going to come in and absolutely crush, and it's just going to tilt everybody. I'm kind of glad that Batum is listed as probable now because I did not want to play chalk Jeremy Lamb. I hate chalk Jeremy Lamb day. Like I was so against it with OKC in the OKC game, and I'm glad like he got in foul trouble and it didn't work out because I was so against chalk Jeremy Lamb. Um, it does really change things though that now that Batum is probably going to play, like I still really like Kimba, and I'm probably going to tweet about it again today. Like I don't care about his home road splits. Like they do not exist. Like I realize his efficiency goes down just a little bit, and like he averages like a little less than 2 fantasy points per game less on the road, but that's not a split. That's just like I don't know what it is, but that's not like a huge enough split to fade a guy just because he's on the road. This is an excellent game. I know Chris Paul defense is solid, but like I have a lot of interest in Kimba and GPPs, and it's a revenge game for Dwight. So
It
there's
is.
that.
It is. And Howard's the guy I was kind of messing around through before. Like you still Adams and DJ like still in that range. You just kind of want to lock them in. I will have 1 share or 2 shares of Howard, just building multiple lineups and kind of go that route because it is the revenge game. But I do like this game. I think there is a lot of potential here, and I still think even on the Charlotte side, I'm going to be looking to attack much more with the primary guys and kind of secondary guys who we saw pop off in the last slate they played.
Yeah, my biggest concern with Howard, and like it hasn't necessarily been the case like the past couple games. He kind of struggles in paced up games. Like sometimes gets played off the floor. Like it didn't happen against the Lakers. I mean, he played 32 minutes against the Lakers. I mean, Golden State played 30 minutes, really struggled, only had 26 fantasy points. Like some of these fast paced games, like he struggles. Like I know he did have a huge game against the Rockets the first time they squared off. He played 32, almost 32 minutes and had 47 fantasy points. But like the Rockets are a really solid rebounding team. Like I don't know if I want to go there. In GPPs it's fine, but in cash games, like it's DeAndre, it's Adams, like those guys over him. How many boos do you think he gets tonight?
Oh, a ton. Like he has to. I mean, he just like he's gonna get it. Like there's just no way that he doesn't. And then the thing is too, it's like he doesn't deserve half the crap I feel like he gets either.
I mean, I think he does a little bit, but like I think some of it's blown out of proportion.
It is, and that's kind of what I mean. Like clearly he's done some stuff in the past, and he's given up on some teams, and we've seen that. But he's been a little whiny. But people always kind of pick on the whiny guy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like the media, like everybody turned on him really, really quickly. So it's just kind of the way the cycle works with some of these stars, though.
Yeah, it is. Did you have any interest in guys like Marvin Williams or MKG here?
Uh, like I don't know. MKG is still really cheap, and it's a spot where you would expect him to play a decent amount of minutes. His cash game viable. I don't know that he has a 38 point upside again. So I don't know that he's really a GPP option, but he's cash game viable.
And on the Rocket side of things, we'll start with this backcourt here. I like Chris Paul, obviously playing really well. Have no issue with him in really any format. But I know like we kind of talked about some guys also around in that range with Lowry, Lillard, if Nurkic sits, Irving, kind of all in a similar tier for me here.
Yeah. Hey, can I fill you and all of our watchers in on a really, really just a secret that nobody knows?
Yeah,
The
let's hear it.
Rockets are really good at basketball.
It's funny because I didn't know that, honestly, until you just told me. Like they have the best offensive rating like in NBA history right now. I think I
Yeah,
saw that.
they are like a historically good basketball team right now. They're averaging 120.8 points per game during their 10-game winning streak, and they shot 55% from the floor against the Pelicans on Monday. They're really good. Chris Paul obviously in play. I do like him a lot. Harden, I'm never going to say don't play James Harden. Like even with Chris Paul here, he's still putting up huge games. Like he still has a massive ceiling and a really solid floor. Like this game could like if Charlotte can find a way to keep this game close, like this could be another like 130, 123 game like Monday's was. Could be a lot of scoring. I do really, really like Harden. And if you're fading Boogie in cash, like I think Harden is the cash game option to pay up for.
Yeah, and the last slate, where he played New Orleans, he was fairly low owned, like by Harden standards. I think because there was a lot of stars, and obviously there's a lot of stars tonight, but it was 18% in the $4 GPP, and we're kind of around that range in some other ones. Like if I'm gonna get Harden for less than 20%, like I'm pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, I think just groupthink has kind of led people off of Harden because with Chris Paul there, everyone just expects Harden's ownership and production to go down. But still playing really well together, and the usage is not like terribly lower with Chris Paul. Like these guys are playing off of each other really well. So I like he's a great play in all formats.
Yeah. Did you have any interest in secondary guys here? Trevor Ariza, like Eric Gordon, I still don't mind in this spot too.
Gordon's fine. The rest of the guys, like I'm not really high on, and I'm not. It's like Clint Capella is probably going to see a decent amount of minutes, but it's kind of funny. Like he got criticized by D'Antoni after the New Orleans game because like he just couldn't play any minutes. Like his conditioning was so bad, he was so gassed out there. But like the dude still put up 28 points and 8 rebounds with 5 blocks. Like GPPs, it's fine. If Capella's conditioning is still going to be terrible, Nene is interesting. Like you could see some extra minutes from him. I'm trying to look and see like who played more minutes at the 5. Like let's see. If Capella only played 24, Nene played 9, Tarek Black didn't play. Wait, how many did Nene play? He played 13, so it's 11 minutes. Maybe they played like some Imba Mute at the 5 or something. I don't know. Yeah, though it's Capella and GPPs, maybe a little flyer on Nene. The rest of the guys just not that appealing to me.
No, low fantasy points per minute guys. Like Ariza continues to do that thing where he just plays 39 minutes and scores you 21 or 19 fantasy points.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what it is. I guess if you really want to reach and you're trying to build an all narrative team, um, Chris Paul used to play for the Hornets when they were in New Orleans. I believe Ariza did too.
Yeah.
I don't know if Gordon and Anderson were with the team were with the New Orleans Hornets, but I mean, it's a long stretch. But if you're building an all narrative team, there you go.
It's been a narrative week, So I expect you to pop over in Slack and be like, "Hey, I just built this team. I got 16,000 left over of it because I'm playing all narratives."
I actually started to build an all narrative lineup last night, and I stopped doing it because I ran out of plays. But like it started with Oladipo, uh, and Sabonis and Paul George. I guess I could throw Most Bates, Chris Paul, and Ariza in there, and then I'd almost have it all.
Well, that's it, man. We made it through our 9 games here. What do you want to do now? Do you want to do points per dollar? Do you want to go high score? We could change it up too and do something else.
Um, let's go with which narrative street play is going to have the best performance tonight.
All right. I'll let you take this one first.
I want to say Oladipo, but that's like so easy.
It's hard because you feel like that game is the biggest narrative game here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Oladipo.
All right. Yeah, I'm not gonna go George. I'm gonna say, you know what? Give me some Howard, man. You know what? Howard
There you go.
shows up tonight. Maybe he rests the next game because he is so ass tired because he plays in this game. But you know what? Give me a 50 plus outing out of Howard tonight.
I dig it. Are there any Instagram models going to any of these games tonight?
Yeah, I need to check that. I need to check the feeds here.
Yeah, I need to get on Rob's Twitter page and see if there's any Instagram models going to any of these games.
The problem is I just get distracted and then workshop for the rest of the day.
Well, I'm lucky. Like, I don't have to do anything for a few more days.
That's true. You're off. So
Ah,
that's it for us. You can go to dayfantasycafe.com, check out great tools and content. Also, Brent's article up for his GP picks tonight. And we'll catch you guys Friday.
good luck.